case. So I'm wondering if some of you have listened to Kathy Wakile's interview with Kim D this past Saturday. You know, Kim D has a podcast, Get Real with Kim D, and it's on her Patreon, and her guest was Kathy Wakile. And I have to say, guys, I have to be completely honest before we get into the thick of it all. Kathy Wakile looked absolutely beautiful. Okay, I have to say that. You know, she has a lot of hair, right? I love the cut. It's simple, it's chic, it's elegant. She had a nice little crisp white shirt on. She looked better than ever, in my opinion. And, you know, Kathy has gorgeous eyes, right? So elegant as always and very classy. So before we talk about the interview, and I give you some of the good stuff that Kathy shared with Kim D. Just a few things that I was not aware of, or that at least I did not know, and I found that it was very interesting. So we all know that Kathy is married to Richie, who is not Italian, but he is Lebanese, which is a beautiful culture as well. I have many friends that are Lebanese. And the food is delicious. And we've seen Kathy cook on the show, right? Remember when she had the ladies over for this like goddess party and all of that? She had this beautiful spread with like Middle Eastern food. And the ladies were very, very, very impressed. Even Caroline was just like, oh my gosh, you cooked all of that? It looks delicious. I love Middle Eastern food and all of that. So I knew that Kathy knew how to carry her own in the kitchen. That I knew. However, I did not know that Kathy knew how to speak Arabic. I did not know that. And I was very impressed when she said that. You know, I think she was, because, you know, Kim D was giving her like a lot of props for that. And, you know, Kathy is a little bit more understated. So she was just like, oh, you know, I speak enough to be able to carry a conversation. But I think she is probably close to being fluent in Arabic, which I think is fantastic, because she said that, you know, although Richie's family, like his dad and Richie's dad and his mother, although they spoke perfect English, you know, the way that they interacted with each other, like as family members, was mostly in Arabic. And Kathy, she didn't want to be left out of the situation. So she started kind of like picking up on the conversation and asking what certain words mean. And then eventually she was able to, you know, put the words together and able to carry a conversation. So I thought that was great. I did not know this. And I wish that, you know, I wish they would have kind of like utilized Kathy or maximize her character a little bit more on the show, because sometimes I find that the drama, not just me, but the drama, it was really like around Teresa and her family, and Kathy is Teresa's family, believe it or not. So she seems to have like a rich storyline of her own that was not really exploited on the show. You know, Kathy, they only showed us Rosie and her mom, but I also know that Kathy has other siblings, and if they were ever featured on the show, they were never really introduced as her siblings. So I don't know, like, and another thing that I did not know was Kathy and Kim D actually knew each other from way back, like from before. They had a relationship. So Kathy used to, I don't think she owned the salon, I'm not quite sure. I think she worked at a salon or maybe owned a salon back then. And she used to do Kim's hair when Kim was very young and had like a little one. So her relationship with Kim is from way back in the days. So that's another thing that we didn't really get to see on the show while Kathy was on. I never really felt like Kim D had a problem with Kathy on the show, but she was more Teresa's friend, right? So however Teresa felt towards Kathy, I guess like Kim D had to kind of go along with that. So we never really saw that they had, like Kim D was close to Kathy while Kathy was on the show. It's only after that we, the viewer, got to know that Kathy and Kim D had a history, right? So I thought that was very interesting and that I should share that with you all. So Aside from that, so after giving everyone an update, because everybody wanted to know how Richie was doing, how the kids were doing. So everyone's doing well. Victoria, more beautiful than ever. Everybody knows that she's married now. And I think she was supposed to become a nurse, and then she decided to become a teacher instead. And the family is still very tight, very close. Everybody loves each other, so there's no problem on that front. And we see that Kathy and Richie are traveling all the time. They seem to be living la dolce vita, which is great, right? So then Kathy, she gets to talk about how she got to come on the show, The Real Housewives of New Jersey. So to make a long story short, Kathy said that at some point in time, she had an event at the Brownstone. And as you guys know, Kathy and Richie, they knew Albert from a long time ago. That was mentioned on the show. Even Caroline said that at some point in time. She said, oh, Albert will have my neck if we don't invite the Wakiles. They have to be invited, right? So Kathy and Richie used to host a lot of events at the Brownstones, and they know Albert Menzel very well. They know Tommy Menzel very well. They know the Menzel family very well. So Kathy had an event at the Brownstone, some sort of theme event, and I guess it got someone's attention. And at some point in time, Kathy was contacted by telephone by, I think it was the casting director at that point, or a producer. So the producer was like, hey, we've seen an event that you had at the Brownstone. Everything looked pretty nice, and we were very impressed. And we're trying to find some ladies to film for like a show. We're not really sure what type of show at this point in time, but we do work with TLC and this network and that network, and we do cooking shows and yada, 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 right? So obviously, they made it sound like very, very, very broad. It could be like a multitude of opportunities. So, I've seen in the comments, a lot of people seem to be a little bit like skeptical when it comes to that. They're like, yeah, right, Kathy. Or, yeah, right. What do you mean? Like, you knew you were coming on the show. But I have to say, and we'll get back to that a little bit later, I believe Kathy when she says this because, I've read a few books about housewives, even that one, like Not All Diamonds and Rosé. And I've heard a lot of different housewives say the exact same thing. I remember that Nene said that when she was approached, they just came and just said, hey, we're looking for some ladies that live behind the gates. And, you do have a few friends that you can introduce. But they never told them that it was for the Real Housewives of Atlanta at the time, right? Nene, in Atlanta, it was supposed to be called Ladies Behind the Gate or the Ladies of Atlanta or something like that, right? And I believe that Bethany said something similar as well when they were trying to recruit women for the New York franchise and all of that. So that story that Kathy is telling seems to co-sign with a lot of stories that other housewives have said in the past as well. So anyways, at that point in time, Kathy was thinking, well, I do like to cook and my kids are a little bit older. I need to find something to do with myself because, my kids don't need me as much. And then I'm not going to go back to doing hairdressing and all of that, right? So that was a possibility at that point. So they booked an interview with Kathy. And I believe at that point they come, like the producers, they come to your house and the interview was supposed to last for approximately an hour. And then eventually it extended to like over 4 hours and a half. Not that the producers were overstaying their welcome, but at some point Kathy was like, I'm still a mom, I'm still a housewife, my kids are home, they're probably hungry, and I need to make some food. So she started cooking, and at that point comes the camera. All on Kathy and her cooking, and they're filming. So Kathy says that at that point, she really felt like, oh my gosh, I might land this cooking show after all, because in her mind, it was to be a cooking show. So the meeting wraps up, or the interview, and then she doesn't really hear back right away. And then at some point in time, I guess they contacted her to let her know that, hey, since we filmed you, we kind of need you to sign this little release or non-disclosure agreement, maybe not an NDA per se, but something similar. So basically Kathy was not to discuss the interview and or tell or say that, she was interviewing with them. And they told her at that point that it was for Housewives. So according to Kathy was shocked. She was not expecting that because she was like, well, I watch reality TV, I like to watch Top Chef. I've watched like Orange County, like other franchises. And of course, I am familiar with the Housewives of New Jersey because my cousin is on, right? And I don't want to fight with my cousin. I'm not about that. Like Kathy was thinking like, listen, when I watch the show, I don't see myself identifying to, like, I don't identify with these women. Like, I don't see myself, like, I am a housewife, but am I a real housewife? Like, that was basically kind of like her thought process back then. And, I guess the casting director at the point was just like, okay, no big deal. Like, Kathy was really like, I don't want no part of that. And they're just like, just think about it. And then, no news for a while, right? So then at some point in time, I think that was in April when she was told by the casting director that the show would be for the Real Housewives of New Jersey. So then fast forward to May of that year, Kathy is in Florida enjoying a beautiful vacation with her family. And then she receives a phone call. And the phone call is from her cousin, Teresa. And a very upset Teresa at that. Okay, Teresa is fuming. She is fuming at that point. Okay, so apparently, according to Kathy, that was on Memorial Day long weekend. So then Teresa calls her and says, I can't believe, because she's in disbelief at that point, and that was in May, right? She says, I can't believe that you have had an interview with the producers. So then Kathy is like, what are you saying to me? Like, what's going on? Because, she's on vacation. She's about to come home from Florida back to New Jersey. She's thinking that Teresa is reaching out to her to get together once she's back. And then Teresa's basically upset on the phone. And she's like, what is wrong with you? How did you do this behind my back, right? So then they go at it for a little bit. And then Teresa eventually lets the cat out of the bag. And she tells Kathy, I know that both you and Melissa had an interview with the producers. And then Kathy goes, huh? Melissa, what do you mean? Because at that point, Kathy did not know that Melissa had had an interview as well. And it makes sense because if production asked Kathy not to speak about it and made her sign a little paper, they probably did the exact same thing with Melissa. So then Kathy and Teresa go at it some more. And then Teresa's really upset. She feels betrayed. She probably thinks that Kathy and Melissa are in cahoots at that point and trying to get on the show behind her back. Okay. So then at some point in time, Kathy says, like, that's not the story. That's not in the story, but just a little bit of a sidebar. She says that she always knew that Melissa wanted to be on the show. And she didn't say that in a shady way. She was just stating a fact. And she said, I always knew that Melissa wanted to be on the show. Like, it was her dream. She was trying to be in front of the camera. She was going to events because she was hoping to be cast on the show or any show, right? She wanted to be in the limelight. And at the same time, that kind of co-signs what I said to you guys a few episodes ago. I found an old article of Melissa. Remember, Melissa was saying that she was the only one back then who encouraged Teresa to do the show, to do the Real Housewives of New Jersey. And she also said that if the opportunity was given to her, she would take it because, she liked to sing and she wanted to to see if she had a chance, in that career, right? So Melissa always wanted to be in front of the cameras. And Kathy did not say that in a shady way. She was like, yeah, I always knew she wanted to be on the show, but I didn't know that she wanted to interview, or that she did an interview with Housewives. So I know like some people are going to say, well, you see, she came on Teresa, like behind Teresa's back, or she was really trying to get on the show. And, you know, I kind of have a different perspective when it comes to the whole thing now, because just think about it that way. Like, if we're not even discussing Housewives at this point, if you're interested in a job or in an opportunity, wouldn't you put yourself out there to try to get it, to try to secure it? Let's say it was the job of your dream. Would you just wait for the opportunity to come to you, or would you try to create instances where you could be seen or noticed or that kind of stuff? So when I really think about it, I don't think she did anything wrong there. You know, she really wanted to be on camera, and she made sure that when they were filming that, you know, she would be at this event, or that she would be in front of the camera. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's wrong at all, but I digress. So anyways, at some point in time, Teresa said to her, well, you know what? This show is about drama, and I'm the star of the show, and I will not film with you because I am the star and I don't have to be in your company. So then Kathy, she didn't like that very much. And then she just said to Teresa, you know what, Teresa, enough with you, F off. And she hung up the phone on her. That's what Kathy said. She was like furious. She was mad. And I guess right after that phone call, Kathy called the casting director, and she kind of named her a new one, if you know what I mean. And then the casting director told Kathy, well, listen, we really liked you. And then Kathy's like, I don't have a problem with you liking me, but it would have been nice that you told me first that you really, really, really like me, and that you're strongly, strongly, strongly considering me, instead of calling my cousin, you know, like. So then the casting director said to Kathy, yeah, we really like you, and we like another person too, you know what I mean? And then Kathy was like, okay. So the casting director never said to Kathy who the other person was. But after having that conversation with Teresa, Kathy puts 1 + 1 together, and she knows that the person is probably Melissa, right? So then after her phone call with the casting director, she calls Melissa, and then Melissa says to Kathy, oh, did she call you? And then Kathy's like, what's up, Melissa? What's going on? Like, we've been together so much, me and you and Joe, and you never said anything. What is going on? And then Melissa's like, well, I couldn't say anything, probably just like you, right? And they really like us, and they're really considering us. And, you know, I think Melissa at that point is like, yeah, it's a done deal for me. Like, I wanted this, and I'm getting it, right? So Kathy is just kind of like, I guess it's taking her time. Like, she has to process all of this, because at first she didn't know it was Housewives, and then now they're actually liking her, and now Melissa is also joining the show, and then now Teresa's mad at her, and it seems like there's a lot of drama going on, and the show has not even started. And that was in May. Okay, so let's just remember that date for a little bit. So anyways, so then Kathy, she's like, you know, she talks to Kim, and she's saying that she's talking to her husband about it, Richie, and he's a little bit less emotional, you know, towards the whole situation. He's just like, well, it's an opportunity for you. Like, who cares what your cousin thinks, right? So at that point, Kim D kind of interjects, and, you know, Kim D, she gets super excited sometimes, and it can come across like she's interrupting. But Kim D, she made a comment, and she said to Kathy, in Teresa's defense, she said, you know what, like, I'm not sure about this, like, correct me if I'm wrong, sort of thing, but it doesn't really seem like Richie ever really liked Teresa too much, right? Because he was always busting her balls when he was on the show. So that's what Kim D was saying. So at that point, Kathy, she clarified the whole situation and said that Richie has absolutely nothing against Teresa, that in fact, he loved Teresa very much, because I think, if I go by memory, I think like Kathy and Teresa have like 6 or 7 years They're like 6 or 7 years apart, and Kathy got married in her 20s to Richie. So if you do the math, Richie Wakile has known Teresa for a good majority of her life at that point, right? Like when she was very young. So Kathy kind of like explains their relationship more like a big brother, little sister type of thing, and that Richie was just sort of like always picking on Teresa, but in a playful manner, just like a big brother would. And she even says that Teresa used to laugh at his jokes. Like they had like a very endearing relationship, which was maybe not always portrayed on the show. But I know that the Richie character is very polarized. Like there's a lot of people out there that love Richie. There's a lot of people out there that don't like Richie. For my part, I don't think that Richie picked on Teresa. I just thought that he was funny. I truly do. I think he was funny. He had like wise little crack, like, he would crack little wise jokes. And I don't know if you guys remember in Lake George after the fight between the men, I think it was the next day. And then Richie and Rosie and Kathy were in a room and they were talking about what had just transpired. And then, Rosie had like a bedhead, or like, I don't know, like her hair was like super messy. And then Richie made a joke about that. And then eventually he said like something like, oh, you have an afro down that. I don't know. It was pretty funny joke. So I always thought Richie was funny, and I never felt like he was picking on Teresa, but Teresa might disagree. So anyways, so after that, Kathy, after speaking with Richie, he's like basically convincing her that this is a good opportunity for you, and if this is what you want to do it, and you shouldn't let anyone intimidate you into not doing it, sort of thing, right? So fast forward to September. That's when filming was supposed to start. So then Kathy receives her contract, like her official contract as a housewife. And now at that point, Kathy, this is September, guys. So she is still hurt. She's still upset from her phone call with Teresa back in May of that year, okay? So at that point, Kathy's like, yeah, Teresa, this is what I'm going to do for you. And she decides to be petty Kathy. She picks up the phone and she says to Teresa, it's Kathy. I'm holding my contract in my hands, and I didn't want you to hear it from anybody else. And click. And she hung up on Teresa. To her defense, though, Kathy does say that in retrospect, that was petty and immature, but that's how she felt at that point. She was upset. Her and Teresa went at it back in May. There was no other conversation between the two ladies from May to September. So, Kathy probably held a little bit of a grudge from the argument with Teresa, and Teresa telling her, I'm a star, I don't have to film with you. You're not important, kind of thing. So Kathy wanted to stick it to Teresa at that point and just be like, you know what? I have my contract in my hands, and bye-bye. Bye-bye, Teresa. That's what Kathy did, right? So then, during the interview, they talk about the infamous christening. The infamous christening scene and all of that. And Kim D, at that point, she says to Kathy that she had heard of a rumor, and that the rumor was, okay, if you guys remember, there's that scene at the end, after the big fight and everything, and the cameras go down and up and back again. Like, it was like a really bad situation. So we see Joe Gorga and Papa Gorga and Mama Gorga in the hallway where Joe is losing it. Like, he's really, really mad, really upset. And he's talking to his parents, and at that point he's saying to his mom in Italian, "You're so cold, you're cold, you're cold towards my wife, towards me, towards my kids." And then he says to his dad, "I'm like you, I'm tough, you raised me to be like you, like why do you get influenced by this man?" and all of that, right? And then it becomes super emotional, and it's a little bit of a scene, actually a lot of a scene, because there's people around, like people are watching, everybody's just like, oh my gosh, like, it's not just a conversation between Joe Gorga, his dad, and his mom, like there is an audience, everyone is watching. So then Joe, he, remember that infamous scene where he screams at his dad and he said, "You're my father, you're my F-shot father," right? He says that. So apparently, and I've never heard of this rumor before, but this is what Kim said, and I thought that was very interesting. She said that allegedly something got cut out of that scene, that it did not make the edit on purpose because maybe production thought it was too painful or too sad of a scene, so they decided to leave it out. But again, allegedly. But apparently, Papa Gorga got so mad at his son that he smacked him in the face and said, "Stop!" So I don't know if this is true, guys, but I had to go and watch that scene again. And this is why that scene is like, not just that scene, that whole episode is so, like, it speaks to a lot of people. Because to me, there's a lot of stuff on the show that, it might be a little scripted, a little staged at times, but that seemed very, very real to me, that scene. Okay. And I just remember Papa Gorga saying to Joe, sit down. Like, I remember that. I remember him saying that to him. And I don't know if it happened. I don't know if he smacked him in the face. Kathy cannot co-sign on that either, because at that point she had already left the party. She had another party to go to. And so she said she doesn't know. She doesn't know if that took place. But all I can say is that I've heard of crazy stories, not from the show, but a lot of things happen sometimes at weddings, baptisms, or sacred like moments, like, emotions run really high sometimes, and people do like crazy things. Like, I've heard of father and son getting into it at a wedding. Like, I've heard some things, right? So I don't know if it's true, but it's definitely a possibility. So anyways, fast forward to the unattended comment, okay? So if you guys recall, at the christening, you could see Adriana on a stroller and you could see other kids around and the men are fighting and all of that. So Kim D brings up the whole thing about the fashion show. Teresa walked at the fashion show with Melissa, and then Kathy was in attendance. And at some point in time, Kathy decides to take Teresa and say, "Hey, cousin, I want to talk to you, and did you talk to your brother? Did you talk to your sister-in-law? And, are you going to try to make peace with them?" And then Teresa's like, "Well, where were you? Where were you? Like, as soon as the going got tough, you ran away. Where were you?" And then Kathy responded at that point, "Well, I had my children to take care of. I didn't want them to see all of this, like I didn't raise them like that. This is sad, a family fighting, men fighting. I was trying to take my kids out of there." So then Teresa said, "Well, your kids are older. They would have been fine." So, and I have to say, and I've said it before, we actually never hear Kathy say on the show the word unattended to Teresa, but we hear her say, "Yeah, in fact, I saw Adriana was on a stroller. She was left alone and I strolled her out of there," right? And then at that point, Teresa loses it, okay? And she's like, "What are you saying? Unattended? I am done with you. You're not a good cousin. You're not a good person. You did not have my kid," and all that stuff, right? So I remember those days. The internet went wild on that comment, okay? And although, how long ago was that? Like 11 years ago already, I think. Yeah. So although I see Kathy's heart because she explained, she didn't mean to say that. And Kim D at this point is also backing her up in the interview, right? She's like, you were being a good cousin. You were strolling her out of there. You did what a lot of mothers would have done. And Kathy was like, well, I was not alone. Other mothers were doing the exact same thing too. They're just like, trying to figure out where the kids were and get them back to safety, right? So I get what Kathy says, and I get what she means or meant. But at the time, even though she did not use the word unattended, she did say Adriana was left alone, right? And I do not believe that Kathy was being malicious when she said that, but I could also understand why Teresa reacted in the way that she did. I have to be honest with that. I do, because I feel like mothers, we tend to be a little bit overprotective with our kids, as we should be, right? And the implication that you left your child unattended or without supervision or in a dangerous situation or left alone, I could see Teresa being mad over something like that. And not just her, a lot of women actually. A lot of women would be really, really upset if they were said that. Like a lot of mothers, right? So I feel like Kathy could have said something different. And mind you, they were arguing at that point. It's like Kathy came up to Teresa to talk about Joe and Melissa, and then somewhat the conversation got turned around to the kids. And then maybe Kathy felt kind of like, pushed into a corner, and maybe she felt like she had to defend herself. And when you're mad, sometimes you overspeak. So she said left alone, but really probably what she meant at that point was, listen, yeah, my kids, they're older, but I was also not just worried about my kids. I was worried about everybody's kids, like this kid over there, that kid over there, all the kids, including yours, right? She could have said that and just left alone kind of thing, right? But anyways, and I feel like maybe if it was presented in that manner, I don't think Teresa would have gotten that upset, but who knows? She might have gotten super upset anyways. That's just like my own opinion. I just think that I understand why she reacted in that manner. So, and then, they kind of talk about editing a little bit because, that whole scene happened while Kathy, Teresa, and Melissa were at the Brownstone, which is Caroline's, banquet hall with Albert Manzo and his brother. So if you remember, Caroline got really upset and she said, kill each other in your own home, like your family, where to find each other, yada, yada, yada. And then Kathy, she felt like, her first impression with Caroline was not really the best. So she decided to meet up with Caroline at her house, like her actual house, brought her some flowers to explain the situation. So, when we see the episode, we see Kathy sort of apologizing to Caroline and Caroline responding in a very cut and dry manner. I don't care. So then Kathy explains to Kim that Caroline did say, I don't care during that meeting, but it wasn't in relation to Kathy apologizing at that point. So when Kathy said, I'm sorry, like that this happened, Caroline did not say, I don't care, right? She said that about something else. Kathy couldn't remember what it was. But she said that, in fact, her meeting with Caroline was not it was not a bad experience. She doesn't remember or recall Caroline being nasty or mean to her in any way, shape, or form. And that's where the editing kind of comes into play. So Kathy did say that. And then at some point in time, it brought up this whole thing between Kim D and Kathy. I don't know if you guys knew this. I did know this because I actually remember I watched that episode on Watch What Happens Live a long time ago. And Kathy was on Watch What Happens Live with Andy. And we all know that Andy can be shady at times and he likes to ask those shady questions. And, he likes to also plug the Posh fashion show, the Posh store, that kind of stuff. So he asked Kathy, have you been shopping at Posh? And I think Kathy responded, no, I haven't been I haven't shopped there. I don't shop there, or something around those lines. So you know how things can get blown out of proportion on the internet, and then maybe Kim D saw some clips or an audio of that, and then she was maybe thinking, is Kathy trying to be shady towards me? Like, why is she talking as if she doesn't shop at my store? Like, she has shopped at my store before. Like, why? She doesn't want to give me a shout out? Like, you know, like people tend to get a little defensive when it comes to their place of business, right? So Kim was a little mad at Kathy, and for some time they had a little bit of tension between them, but like two grown ladies, they call each other and they kind of set the record straight. And then Kathy was like, hey, you know how it is. It's a show. That's not how I meant it. Like, it's all blown out of proportion. And then Kim was just like, okay, let's be friends again, where I'm not mad at you anymore, that kind of thing, right? So for those who did not know about that beef, that's what that situation was. But I wish I had sent out a question for Kim when it comes to that, because I always wanted to know, and I'm not trying to be shady, or maybe I'm trying to be shady just a little. But I don't know if you guys recall, okay? There was an episode. It was right after Papa Gorga went to the hospital for like a few nights. And then Teresa and Kim D had a coffee at this place called Neo Cafe or Cafe Neo. I can't remember. It's one or the other. And then they're talking, and Kim D's asking for an update on Papa Gorga and his medical situation. And then at that point, Teresa receives a phone call. And the phone call is from her friend, Linda, right? And then Linda is calling and saying, oh my gosh, Teresa, I'm at the gym. And she's on speakerphone. And she's like, you won't believe who's there. And then Teresa's like, who? And she's like, Jacqueline, your sister-in-law, and Kathy. And then Linda makes a comment about Jacqueline and says, you know, Jacqueline's fat ass is at the gym. That's what she says, right? And then the ladies are laughing, like Teresa and Kim, they're laughing. They think that's funny. And then Kim D makes a comment too. And she says, what about Kathy's fat ass? How does it even go through the door, right? Kathy, Kim D said that about Kathy. And then Linda, she continues and she's like, you know, she body shames Kathy in that comment. And then the ladies are laughing, right? You can tell that Teresa, you know, she's laughing, but she's a little uncomfortable at that, but just a little bit, because it's still her cousin, right? She couldn't care less about Jacqueline at that point. And we already know that she doesn't like Melissa. But when Linda said, you know, the shaming comment about Kathy, Teresa was not laughing as much, okay? But Kim D was, and Kim D called Kathy, like, she fat shamed her a little bit, right? So I don't really care about the whole thing with Andy Cohen on the set of Watch What Happens Live and the little, you know, shady comment about Posh. But I wish I knew, or I'd ask somebody before the interview with Kathy, how did Kathy and Kim get past that comment? Especially as friends, now that we know that they had a relationship prior to the show, how did Kathy react when she saw that comment? You know, Kim body shaming her on the show. So part 2 will be released. I believe it's supposed to be released sometime this Saturday. I'm hoping to find some juicy bits to just share with you all. And that's all I have for today, guys. That's it. Thank you for listening. I love you all. And as always, be a fan, not fanatical. Ciao.